So firstly, I'd like to welcome you all to today's webinar. It's a very interesting topic. I mean, the strength of detachment in turbulent times. And this topic is very important for the maintenance of our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being as we all battle through a world that is getting increasingly challenging by the day. It is no secret that in addition to physical illnesses, our mental and emotional health is also compromised. And as human beings, we all have a natural tendency to get attached to people, expectations, and outcomes. And we become increasingly engrossed in them because we engage intensively in this direction, which is not always healthy. And in this way, we lose our clarity, which is critical to our well-being. So our attachment can cause us to lose our clarity. And this opens the door to confusion, emotional hurt, and more. So these are what I call our three greatest ills. Our three Achilles heels. We all have Achilles heels. I think these are our three greatest ones, in my opinion. The first one is unhealthy attachment. The second one is obsessive engagement. And the third one is intense expectations. So these are the three: unhealthy attachment, obsessive engagement, and intense expectations. Now, please remember these, and even during your day-to-day life, look within and explore the way you emotionally journey through this world and see if you are pressing on any one of these three Achilles heels that we all have. Now, interestingly enough, we all foster these three ills unknowingly, or out of love, or out of the best of intentions, depending on our nature and personality. And this, my dear friends, leads to physical, mental, and emotional damage, which we find ourselves in today. And of course, the turbulence of our world and its events don't help. They only serve to accelerate this downward spiral. So the question is, how can we find our way out of this storm without incurring any further damage? How can we find our way out of this storm without incurring any further damage? And secondly, how can we heal the injuries that we have already suffered? So these are two quick questions we're going to ponder on today. And in this regard, my dear friends, healthy detachment is one of the key answers to these questions. Now, the word detachment means different things to different people. And unfortunately, the concept of detachment is largely misunderstood. So let us start by trying to get a clearer understanding of what detachment actually means, particularly in the context of today's topic. So I have narrowed down what the published literature says about detachment in this regard, specifically about healthy detachment. So what is healthy detachment? Healthy detachment is the ability to engage fully with life's events and experiences without being emotionally controlled by the outcomes. Secondly, healthy detachment is not indifference or avoidance, but on the contrary, it is a healthy form of disengagement that brings better clarity and represents and prevents unnecessary damage to our well-being at all levels. So if we repeat these two, because they are really important, healthy detachment is the ability to engage fully with life's events and experiences without being emotionally controlled by the outcomes. That's very important because we all get emotionally controlled. Secondly, healthy detachment is not indifference or avoidance, but on the contrary, it is a healthy form of disengagement, an important word, that brings us better clarity and prevents unnecessary damage to our well-being at all levels. Okay? So we are clear there. Now, what are the most common misconceptions about the word detachment? Because there's a lot of misconceptions, so we want to clear them up right at the beginning. Misconception number one: detachment means emotionless, not caring, being distant, and cold. That's the first misconception. The reality is, healthy detachment allows emotions to flow naturally without being overwhelmed by them. Misconception number two: detached people don't invest in relationships. The reality is, healthily detached people build deeper and more authentic relationships because they are not driven by insecurity, fear, or the need to control others. Third misconception: detachment means giving up on goals and aspirations. The reality is, healthily detached people pursue goals with enthusiasm, but they do not let failure or success define their self-worth. Very important. For example, a person practicing healthy detachment can love deeply, but will not be broken if a relationship changes or ends. He or she appreciates what was, learns from it, and moves forward with peace. So, in summary, therefore, healthy detachment in its true sense is not about indifference, avoidance, or emotional suppression, but instead, it is the ability to engage fully in life's relationships and experiences while maintaining inner balance, and accept outcomes without excessive attachment, whether they are favorable or not, and remain mentally and emotionally clear rather than being controlled by expectations, fears, or external pressures. For example, a healthily detached person can pursue a goal with passion, but will not be emotionally devastated if the outcome differs from their expectations. They adapt, they learn, and they move forward. So this is healthy detachment. So I hope we are all clear on that. And this is a good starting point for us, because a more clear understanding of healthy detachment is our goal for today. And then we're going to learn practical ways of achieving healthy detachment. Okay, so this brings us to the how part. How do we learn to detach ourselves in a healthy and constructive manner without falling into the trap of the misconceptions we have just explored? We can practice healthy detachment at three key levels. The first one is the spiritual level, second is the mental, and the third, the emotional level. Now, as you have noticed, I have put spiritual level at the top of the list because it is the core basis on which we can aim to practice healthy detachment. And we are going to let the spiritual level drive the mental and emotional levels for a change, because that's really where our true powers lie. So let us try to understand healthy detachment from a spiritual level. There is a verse in the scriptures that I have shared with you in the past in different contexts. And it says, and I paraphrase, "Say he, the Creator, is one. He is absolute and the origin. He is non-divisible, with no beginning and no end. And there is none comparable to him, i.e., he is beyond all imagination." Now, we've gone through this scripture many times in different webinars under different contexts. And I found this scripture to be filled with answers depending on whatever context one seeks to explore, which is why I use it today to explain detachment from the spiritual level. So let's go a bit deeper. He, the Creator, is one means he is unity. He is oneness. So everything he creates emerges from his oneness, making us all part of one creation. And there's another verse in the scriptures which says, "We created you from one soul." So we as individuals and as a humanity and as a creation are one. We are all oneness. So this is our first key premise. We are all one, and all creation that we see and do not see, manifest or unmanifest, is one. Next, the scripture says he is absolute. He is the absolute, the origin. Now, what does absolute mean? Absolute is like the number 0. All numbers emerge from 0. All creation originates from the absolute, hence the name origin. Now let us look at the shape of the number 0, and I'm going to share my screen with you so that I can explain or illustrate it better. Here is the number 0 with a thin circular boundary called the 0 circle. So you can see this thin boundary. Now if you were to measure the area of this thin boundary, it is minuscule compared to the area of what is in the circle. So this boundary would only occupy, say, 1%. 99% of this area is actually within the circle. Now look at the space inside the circle. It is massive in comparison. As I said, the line only occupies 0.1% of the circle. 99.9% is an empty circle, empty space. Some call this the void space. And what lies within this space is absolutely unknown. Okay, so let us remember this point because it is very important. Next, the scripture says he is non-divisible, with no beginning and no end. Once again, if we look at the 0 circle, it is not divisible. You cannot divide this circle. This circle has no beginning or no end. It is ever continuous. Okay? So, hope that was clear. Sometimes illustrations help take us to the point much better. And then the final part of the scripture says, he is beyond all imagination. Now, if I were to ask you, what is in that 99.9% empty space inside the 0 circle? You would answer, no one knows. And none of us can even start to imagine what is in that empty space. Hence, he is beyond all imagination. So you can see a nice, easy correlation between the circle, its area, its majority of the space in the middle being empty, and what it occupies is something none of us can even start to imagine. That makes the Creator beyond all imagination. Now this has relevance to our material life. Now let us look at this 99.9% unknown empty space a little further, compared to what our material world is made of. And here is a fascinating parallel. It is a scientific fact that 99.9999% of a hydrogen atom is also empty space. 99 point many nines% of a hydrogen atom is empty space. Over 99.9% of all atoms are made up of empty space. Now, some scientists will argue in minutiae about the exact number. We're not going there. But it is safe to say that all atoms are predominantly comprised of empty space. Now, we and all creation are made up of atoms, and atoms combine into molecules. So each one of us and all creation are almost made up entirely of empty space. What we see as materially manifest may only be less than 1% at best, but the rest is empty space. Hence, we are all made up predominantly of empty space, 99.99. Just like the 0 circle of the origin. which also reveals the same empty space. However, we can all assume that this empty space is not absolutely empty, otherwise it would make no sense. Something is present in it, something that our human eye or human science or human intelligence can neither visualize, imagine, or fathom. So what is this profound something that makes the vast majority of us and of everything? I believe that if we view it from the spiritual level, we may discover that what fills this incredible volume of empty space is our essence, our life force. It is the essence of our Creator. It is the essence of the one soul, the essence of oneness. And this essence, needless to say, is supreme intelligence, infinite intelligence. Now, none of us can measure this level of intelligence, so we call it void or empty space. But we know it is filled with supreme infinite intelligence. We, 99.99% of us, are comprised of this intelligence. So let us call this empty space the essence space. The essence space. It is where our higher self resides. So we can also refer to it as the self space. And imagine what we are all made up of is 99.9% plus of essence space, even in this material dimension. So you can see the correlation between a scientific evidence of atoms having this space, the origin, circle of the origin, zero circle, reflecting the same space. And when we talk about we are essence of the origin, well, we are over 99.9%. It is us. And yet, through our material mind and consciousness, isn't it amazing that we perceive only that minuscule aspect of us, the 0 point many zeros 1%. And incredibly enough, we are also engrossed in this minuscule aspect of us that we ignore the 99.99% of ourselves, i.e. pretty much the entire part of ourselves we ignore because we are engrossed in minutiae, in the minuscule. Now, knowing this provides us with the opportunity to start to detach ourselves from the minuscule, which is a 0.01% part of ourselves, and begin to live within our true self, which is the essence space. It is like leaving the thin line of the circle and moving into its core, its empty space. We can pull away our consciousness from being stuck along that thin line, the boundary of the circle, and let it thrive in essence space. That is detachment from the spiritual level, my dear friends. Fascinating, isn't it? It reminds me of a saying I wrote in my first book, which says, "You are the fish that swims in the ocean, yet it is water that you seek." You are the fish that swims in the ocean, yet it is the water that you seek. You are entirely composed of essence, and yet it is essence that you seek. Fascinating. So let us come back to detachment at the spiritual level by going back to the meditation technique I have shared with you on building focus, which we have all been practicing for many years. So let's look at this meditation technique. What is it helping us do? So in this meditation technique, we start by imagining that we relax ourselves. Then we start by imagining that we are at the top of this beautiful mountain, amidst a pristine and beautiful nature, that this mountain is surrounded by snow-capped peaks of other mountains. The morning sun is shining, the grass is green, the dewdrops on the grass are sparkling in the morning sun. There's flowers, there's trees, There is nature, pure nature. And in front of us there is this crystal clear lake of water that is also sparkling in the morning sun. Now, this is nature, and nature is oneness. Hence, we start our meditation by beginning to engage with nature. And if you recall, each time I give you time to engage with nature. So that's the first step in our meditation. Engage with nature, its beauty and oneness. Step one. Next, then, we walk towards this lake and we see a tree stump to our right, which is about the height of our waist. And on this stump, there is a golden cage. And in this golden cage are hundreds of, are countless little beautiful, colorful birds, tiny little birds, chirping around, flying around the cage in chaos. So the cage is our mind. Those tiny little birds are our thoughts. And it's chaotic. So we decide as we go forward, we're going to open the door of the cage and let all these beautiful little birds fly away noisily into the horizon. So we then, in that step, empty out the cage. And we keep reaffirming release and empty, and we empty our mind of all its thoughts. So now you have an empty golden cage. Then we go to the next step, which is to cleanse our mind and remove all the residues of the thoughts that it harbored. If you can imagine a cage full of birds, they leave residue on the floor, unpleasant residue. So like our minds, we cleanse our mind of all these residues of the thoughts it harbored. And this includes cleansing of the emotions that were attached to our thoughts. So it's not just the thoughts that have gone, the emotions that were attached to them, whatever little is left, are cleansed. So this is our first stage of detachment at a spiritual level. Emptying the mind and cleansing the empty mind. Okay? Next, we walk into the crystal clear lake. And we keep walking until the water reaches our knees. And when we stop and we look, and we see that the water has little ripples and waves around our knees. And so when we look at this, we would like this water to go still. And we want it to go completely still. So still that we should be able to see the image of our face in the water as if it were a mirror. So we go into that meditative state of repeating the word stillness. And as we repeat the word stillness, we go into that space where the water calms down and it becomes completely still until we can see our reflection in it. It's like a mirror. And the whole lake in front of us is like a reflective sheet, like a mirror. And this way, not only is the water still, but we have gone completely still from within. And then in this stillness, we then repeat the word silence. Silence. But silence is not just about hearing. It's silence of everything. Silence of all our five senses. So we go into the word silence. Meditate on it. And take ourselves to a state of pure stillness and pure silence. At this stage, we have stopped and silenced every single movement and every single sensory input within us. Sight, touch, taste, smell, hearing. We are now still and silenced. This is our second stage of detachment. Next, we walk further into the lake. And we keep walking till the water reaches our waist, and then we stop again. And in front of us, we see lots of these beautiful little floating candles, hundreds of them. and each one having a beautiful little loving flame. But we see them all and we wish that they should all come together into one candle with one flame. And so as we focus and meditate on that, and the candles come together, and we now see one bright, warm, loving light from that flame, this places us at the zero circle, the circle of oneness. This is our third stage of detachment. We are now at the circle of oneness. Next, we flow into linkage. So, linkage is where we all focus on a word that we believe deep down ascribes the name of our Creator, our source, our essence, our oneness. Now, this word is sometimes given to many of us, and in other cases, you choose your own word. And if you practice your meditation from a religious point of view, it could be the word Krishna, it could be Christ, it could be God, it could be Ram, it could be many things, Allah. And so it could be practiced from a religious point of view if we truly believe that is the name of our Creator, or from a universal, non-religious point of view, it could be nature, it could be universe, it could be origin. So it's entirely dependent on the person who is performing the meditation. But it's very important that he or she completely believe that that word represents his or her source. Now, when you start focusing on that word, what it does is it takes us away from the boundary of the circle of oneness, that thin line, and places us completely into the essence that makes us all up. This is our final stage of detachment. We are now in the essence of oneness. And then, once we are totally immersed in the essence space, we seek to know and become the essence. And so we start repeating our linkage word and immerse ourselves into the essence. And this essence, helps our third eye open. Whether it's a third eye or whether it is a veil being lifted from our eyes, where we now see everything with complete clarity. And that everything is what lies beyond all imagination, because we are unable to describe what it is, because it's beyond human vocabulary. This experience can only come by the grace of the Creator. It is a blessing to receive, not a right to expect. So you can see how our meditation enables us to detach from the minuscule part of ourselves to which we are so attached, and place ourselves fully in our essence space, which is the entire part of ourselves. This is true detachment at the spiritual level. And by practicing this meditation regularly, we can develop the capacity to flow into our essence space, which is highly, highly empowering, this capacity. So now let us explore how we can use this power of detachment in our material world. So hence I started with the spiritual level. So my dear friends, in the material world, in our material existence, each one of us has a mental body and an emotional body that play a dominant role in our material awareness and experiences and more. So let us start with the mental body, our mind. And our mind has three levels, which I have explained in a number of webinars before. We have the lower level mind, which is basically produces thoughts that help us sustain ourselves. So I'm hungry, the thought comes to me, go to the fridge, get out the food, have your meal, and once my hunger is satisfied, that thought has done what it's supposed to do. So this is, at the lower level mind, we produce sustainable or survival-based thoughts. They are the lowest level. Then the next level is the higher level mind, where we make more complex decisions. So here we are not only generating thoughts above the lower level, but we are also integrating wisdom, we are integrating research, we are integrating everything into making higher level decisions. Where should we live? How should I plan my career? What is the best place for me to work? Where should my children go to school? How should I invest for my security when I'm older? These are bigger decisions. They come from the higher level mind. And then the third level is the intellect. And the intellect is the border between the higher self, the essence, and the material level, the higher level mind. So if you remember that circle, the intellect is the border between that line of the circle and everything that lies within. So the intellect is where inspired thoughts flow from our essence space or our higher self. And this essence, as we said earlier, is infinite intelligence. So it creates and manifests very powerful thoughts which flow from the intellect to all levels of our mind. These thoughts have an incredibly high energy that permeates every facet of our mind and emotions because they come from a level that is totally detached from the material world. By contrast, our lower level and higher level minds create thoughts that are of a much lower energy, whose purpose is to enable us to make decisions that sustain our material living, but they are of a much lower energy level. Now, their low energy level makes them vulnerable to negativity, which directly impacts on our mind in adverse ways, needless to say. The more negativity we absorb from people, from life events, from our media, etc., the more damaging these thoughts become to our mind and well-being. Their low-level energy also makes them easily moldable, making us all prone to manipulation. And we see that happening before us every day, all the time, because those low-energy thoughts are easy to mold. Inspiration, on the other hand, is not moldable. It is too powerful to be impacted or manipulated. So now, coming to the emotional body. What is the function of the emotional body? Its function is to generate feelings and emotions that enrich our worldly experiences. Every event and encounter in our lives is colored by our emotions. And this is why we internalize and remember our experiences so vividly, because of what goes with them, the emotions that go with them. So our emotional body is actually the artist within us. It is the orchestra where our feelings are created and played to a melody that completes our experiences. It is the orchestra where our feelings are created and played to a melody that completes our experiences. However, like the lower and higher level minds, our emotional body is also susceptible to negative inputs, either from external sources or from within, depending on our character traits. Insecurity and fear, for example, generate very damaging energies, which hurt not only our mind, but also our physical organs. So the emotional body, like the mind, requires care and managing. This raises the question, how can you manage something when you are completely engrossed in it? Fair question. How can we manage our mind and emotions while being totally absorbed in them? This is where healthy detachment comes in. We start by developing our capacity for detachment at the spiritual level, and I walked you through the various stages of detachment. And through regular meditation and contemplation, as I just explained, we can develop the capacity for detachment. And if you can achieve detachment at that level, you can use its power in the material plane as well. Next, we have to train our mind and emotions using this spiritual capacity to govern our thoughts and emotions in a way that makes them a lot more productive to our well-being. Now, how do we do this, you may ask? Let us look at the key steps that can help us get there. Step 1. As already discussed, we start by building up our capacity to detach at the spiritual level through meditation and contemplation. Step number 2, we have to learn to internally distance ourselves from our material events and experiences. Internally distance ourselves. Now, what do I mean by that? We have to consciously internalize and realize the fact that in order to manage our thoughts and emotions well, we need clarity, which comes from stepping out of our material storms and viewing what is happening from what I call an external vantage point. Now, what is this external vantage point in a material context? So let's go back to the circle. So all material events are occurring here in the red and blue. And by the way, these are not Republicans and Democrats. These are just colors that basically outline a variance, and there's different colors here in what is going on, a diversity of what is happening, okay? So our material events are all occurring here on the outside of the circle. And the vantage point we want to reach lies here, within the circle, in the space that occupies 99.99% of the circle. At the spiritual level, we called it our essence space or our higher self. And at the material level, the same is true. We have the same essence space, wherein at the material level, in our essence space, we have the higher self, along with the material self, better described as our material nature. They all exist here on the inner space, which we can call the self space. So this is the self space, which has our essence, our higher self, and our material nature. Now, when we detach, we step into our self space. And then from here, we view what is happening in that chaotic blue and red boundary of the circle, where our material world and experiences are all playing out. Now remember, through meditation, we have built the capacity to engage with our higher self, and our higher self is here. So stepping into the self space at a material level should now become easier with practice, of course. So as we are able to achieve it in meditation, we can also step in at a material level. And now, from the self space, we can view what is going on out here with absolute clarity. And so that is the second step, which is moving away from the boundary of the circle and going into our self space, where our essence lies, our higher self, and our material nature. Step 3 is now we engage in an internal dialogue with the self, because now you're pulled away and you are in the self space, and so you can now engage in an internal dialogue with the self, remembering that the self encompasses your higher self as well as your material nature. So now you have someone to talk to. This internal dialogue is about assessing the material event that you are looking at, whatever it may be, from your external vantage point in the circle. And then you discuss it with yourself, making it a two-way dialogue. Your assessment of this, what is going on, has two parts. As you are in that internal dialogue, the first part is the thought that comes from your mind, and it communicates with the self, and the thought that comes to your mind in response from the self. So that's how the internal dialogue occurs. So now you have established a live dialogue within yourself. And as soon as you begin to appreciate what your next steps need to be through this dialogue, without being bogged down by emotional and mental chaos, you are able to do the right thing, you are able to act correctly because you're not bogged down with chaos, you are approaching the whole thing with absolute clarity from your external vantage point. This is healthy detachment at a material level. It allows you to examine your events and experiences in the present. It allows you to examine your events and experiences in the present and enables you to make wise decisions with clarity. This, my dear friends, is a major step towards deriving wisdom in the present. Deriving wisdom in the present. We can all examine past events and derive wisdom from them. That is not so difficult to do with the benefit of hindsight. But to derive wisdom in the present, through that internal dialogue with your higher self and material nature, and you derive it in the present, it is an incredible achievement. Because what does this wisdom do in the present? It opens the door at the level of the intellect to enlightened thought that comes from beyond the intellect. And this enlightened thought, my dear friend, is inspiration. One of the most powerful thoughts that your mind and emotions can harbor. And this is how, my dear friends, we can start to live consciously through the intellect, with the intellect, rather than dwelling purely in the lower and higher level minds. What a shift that would be for us all. And now we know how to do it. To help us understand this whole process that we've just learned, let us articulate it through a practical example. So I've just covered the steps. Now let's see how it works in a practical situation. So let us say I am in a situation where I'm having a conversation with someone or a group of people. And this conversation is now getting heated, clearly leading towards an argument. We are headed in the wrong direction. My first signal is the raised voices of the people I am speaking with. So once the voices go up, that's my first signal. My second signal is their body language. As I see their body language go in sync with their raised voice, that's my second signal. And my third signal is the deterioration in the content of our conversation. What is being said now is making less and less sense, bordering on nonsense. By this point, I say to myself, it is time to step out of this one. I need to get out of this and into my external viewpoint. So I visualize the blue and red circle we saw, which is where this angry encounter is brewing. And then I break away from its boundary and step into my external vantage point that lies inside the circle. I break away from the boundary, into that vast self-space where my higher self and my material nature are present to help me. I join them. Once I am at this vantage point, and I can get there because I have acquired the ability to detach from my meditation. So now it's become a more intuitive process where I break in. And once I'm in my external vantage point with my material nature and higher self, the first thing I do is I anchor myself there. Now, how do I anchor myself there? I anchor myself there using my anchor thought. And I've shared the anchor thought technique with you in many previous webinars. So please view the videos to refresh yourselves on the steps. But briefly, in the context of today's webinar, let me briefly summarize what anchor thought is. So anchor thought defines your state of being. It describes your state of being. So if I ask you, how are you, and you say, I'm fine, that is the most useless thing you can ever say because it's meaningless. But your true state of being, if you go into what is your true state of being, when I ask you that question, you will say, I am happy, I am concerned, I am love, I abundance, whatever your state of being is that you are anchored in, it's that state of being which is the word that your anchor thought is. So now, coming back to me standing in that vantage point within my self space, I anchor myself with the words, I am detached. I am detached. I am detached. And then the word detached keeps ringing in my mind. And this actually helps me become comfortable in the middle of the circle. I keep hearing these words as I anchor myself in my self space. Why do I do this? Because the anchor thought helps me remain in the self space without being dragged back into that heated situation before me, where I run the risk of being consumed by unproductive thoughts and emotions. So I've anchored myself in the right place. Next, while I'm viewing everything that's going on, I anchor myself in clarity. So in my mind, I'm repeating, I am clarity. I am clarity. And I keep repeating that word, and then the word clarity keeps ringing in my mind. And then I enter into internal dialogue with the self, where I can reason out what to do best. And while I'm anchoring myself and hearing my anchor word, myself is helping me. It's helping me get grounded, helping me get anchored so that we can have this important dialogue. And within that internal dialogue, I reason out what I should do next. Because I now see the picture before me with clarity. And I digest what is being said by each person and reason through it with myself without being hijacked by my own thoughts, instincts, and emotions, because I'm away from them. What does this help achieve for me? Number one, firstly, it changes my stance and my body language very quickly. Secondly, I draw upon my wisdom from within to calm the situation down. And this may sometimes include, for example, stopping all my reactions to give others a chance to calm down. If I'm not reacting, they calm down. So from experience, we all know that the issue behind such arguments usually boils down to something quite simple. Typically, there are emotions of anger or hurt or feeling disadvantaged or whatever the case may be. That is driving what is being said. And the actual point that could solve everything gets lost in the middle of the emotional chaos. So from this detached position, I am able now to navigate the situation back to calmness and rationality, or at least I do my best to get there. I have a much better chance. Or it is possible that after my internal dialogue with myself, I may decide this is not worth wasting my energy over, and I politely leave the situation. Whatever I decide to do now comes from a vantage point of clarity and wisdom, a much better place to be than the alternative. This is a very simple example, but it helps show us some of the steps you can take and the techniques you can deploy, and use whatever works for you. Now, while we have been on the topic of anchor thought, let us quickly look at some other examples of anchors that you can choose to work with. And here I'm no longer referring to the example of the heated or brewing argument. These are just simple examples of anchors that can be used in whatever context that serves you, be it positive, negative, or neutral, your choice. One that I find I love is, I am in essence space. I am in essence space. It is very powerful when I repeat this because I'm placing myself in essence space. And as you repeat this, you find yourself easily breaking out from the outer part of the circle and coming into the middle. I am in essence space. That's one. And this brings me much peace and clarity. Now, when I use it while walking in nature, it helps me see nature and creation through a very different lens because now I am in essence space. Similarly, I use an anchor thought which says, I am with myself. I am with myself. And this is very reassuring and empowering. Another one is, I am clarity. The other example is, I am confidence, or I am peace, or I am happy, I am humble, I am content, I am fearless, I am compassionate. Or one that I really love is, I am not alone. God is with me. The Creator is with me. I am not alone. The Creator is with me. And this helps me particularly in challenging times. Now I use the word God, your Creator, or I use the name I ascribe to my Creator. I am not alone. He is with me. And somehow it gives me so much strength in challenging times. So these are just some examples you can choose as your anchor words that reverberate best with you, and then you anchor yourself into your essence space, and there you go. You experience what comes next, which is a lot richer than anything you may have experienced before. So in conclusion, let's wrap up by encapsulating the 6 steps very quickly. Encapsulating the 6 steps to achieving healthy detachment. First, build capacity for detachment at the spiritual level through regular meditation. Second, step out of the chaos and into your external vantage point, which lies in your self space, from where you can access your higher self and your material nature. Next, anchor yourself in your self space using your anchor thought. Number 4, assess the situation occurring before you through an internal dialogue with yourself. Number 5, decide upon your course of action through clarity and wisdom. And number 6, implement your decision. Those are your 6 steps, practical steps. Now, in the example I just shared with you, we also looked at potential signals that tell us it is time to detach from a situation. For example, the type of emotions of the people you are engaging with, their body language, or the quality of the conversation you are participating in. If it is deteriorating, for example, it may be time to step out, or listening to your instincts, and more. So these are signals that you must be consciously aware of so that you know it's time to move on, move out, step out, and look at this thing far more objectively than you are at that moment. So I hope you found today's webinar helpful and that you can leave with tools that you can put into practice to achieve healthy detachment. After all, my dear friends, our goal should always be to detach ourselves from our mental and emotional bodies when required and manage them from our self space or essence space, from where we can enhance the quality of our communications, our thoughts, and emotions. And that will lead us to happier relationships, inner peace, and well-being, I pray. And I'd like to thank you all very much for joining us, for bringing your light, for your positive energy, for being here with us. And I pray that the Creator may always be with you, His light may always be with you, to help you, guide you, protect you, and love you. Stay blessed always, and thank you for being here.